Hey guys, it's Lauren here. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to talk about one of the most underrated but also one of the best slice of life hobby anime that I have ever seen, and that is Sound Euphonium, otherwise known as by the Japanese name Hibike Euphonium. Before we hop into the video though, make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps my channel out, so I'd really appreciate it. And also, if you want more content from me, if you just want to see what it is that I talk about aside from anime, well, to be honest, I do talk about anime on my socials as well. I have my socials linked down below. Sound Euphonium is a slice of life anime that was released by Kyoto Animation in 2015. And it was basically released with, I guess, like similar anime within that genre, such as Haikyuu, Kuroko no Basket, and then also Fruit Wars. Just in the sense where it's a hobby, though I would say that the anime that I just listed, of course, they lean more towards shonen, whereas I would say Sound Euphonium is a kind of anime that doesn't really like belong in any specific genre or any specific target demographic. Though if we were to say, just because it has leading women, you would say shoujo josei, but honestly I say based off the way that it is made and like the content of the show itself, I think anyone could really watch. Despite the fact that it was released within the same year as a lot of these big like heavyweighter animes, it managed to hold up on its own. The following year, after 2015, it manages to get a movie, and the movie kind of substitutes for a second season, and then it also gets a spin-off movie as well that's just based off like one of the pieces of music performed within the story. And then also following that, it gets a third season, which we're now watching. Even in 2017, its English novel was released because I think it's based off a light novel series. There's another anime hobby slice of life kind of show that I watch, Ace of the Diamond, and I love that show, but it does not have an English release. So the fact that it even got an English release despite not being the most overly popularized show goes to show like how much of a cult following it has and how good the story itself is. I mean, if it's taken up by Kyoto Animation, it's basically guaranteed to be good. This show was good, and I wasn't even sure we'd get a third season, to be honest, because Kyoto Animation, they did go through that whole, I think there was a fire at their studio which caused like a shutdown in like a lot of their productions, and obviously like a lot of people were hurt, lost their lives. So the fact that it even got a third season at all is a blessing, which is why I really want to put a highlight on the show. All of this to say that despite the show having a really simple premise, which is basically just this girl going to this high school and ended up joining the school orchestra, it manages to have like this really strong pull, like this it factor that makes it stand out outside the crowd. And it's not just its animation, because a lot of these shows have good animation, but there's a bit more to it than that, and I am going to get into it. Here are some of the reasons why Sound Euphonium remains special and one of my favorite animes of all time. Number one would be Kumiko and her character arc. Where we meet her at the start of the show is right after losing the competition in order to get to nationals for her middle school team, and everyone's incredibly disappointed, including her antagonist Reina, who they are basically polar opposites. But essentially, Kumiko decides to go to Kitauji High School on a whim after that defeat. She just wasn't sure she wanted to continue orchestra anymore, so she decided not to go to any competitive orchestra schools. Somehow, because of the pool of fates and really just the whims of her new friends, she ends up joining the orchestra anyways and playing the euphonium. The interesting thing about her character to me is the fact that she's so unlike any other MC I've seen in any other show of this genre. For example, a lot of the shows that I mentioned before, Kuroko no Basket, Haikyuu, Fruit Wars, they all have very charismatic, very earnest center characters, and they all just like have like this earnestness and eagerness in order to do better and excel within the hobby slash sport that they are centered in. So for example, obviously Soma, he really wants to get better at cooking. He wants to prove to everyone that just because he comes from like a common culinary background does not mean that common culinary background is not worth its medal within the field. For Haikyuu, Hinata is like one of the shorter players within the volleyball scene, which means that the role that he wants to play, people are saying that he can't play it. But Hinata has a huge drive to prove them wrong. And then also even in Kuroko no Basket, they all have like their own unique strengths, and they just have the goal of being stronger and beating the generation of miracles. So they all have like this really inherent competitive spirit, which also like makes the other characters within the show really like lean in and be appealed to them. Kumiko isn't like that. I think the reason I enjoy her character actually to a certain extent is because she isn't inherently inspirational to watch, but she is very familiar to watch. She's a character who is obviously in her first year of high school. She isn't exactly sure what her passions are, what it is distinctly that she wants to do. In her loss in the first episode, she watched everyone else around her cry, but she didn't necessarily understand why they were crying, because to her, it essentially was just like this hobby that she was indulging in. She didn't really know, she didn't have that inherent passion to continue to push on in the sport. And part of that is because of uncertainty and also seeing the way her older sister treated the euphonium, because part of the reason that she took it up is because of her older sister, which is such a valid thing. I mean, me personally, like my brother took French and I kind of just like ran with French. At that age, you kind of just like go with things on a whim. The grand majority of people don't necessarily have like an inherent thing that they want to stand by the entire rest of their life, like you would see in a lot of these shonen, which is very special to watch, obviously, but it's just not the experience of an average person. So I think that's what makes Kumiko's character so interesting, because we see her journey go from not being certain of what she wants to do and kind of just being a little bit tentative about the euphonium and getting back into like a situation that could end up in a terrible loss or could end up in something that requires her to feel uncomfortable again, and learning that in fact she does love doing it. I think one of the heartfelt lines of the show that really like stood out to me is her when she just says she wants to improve near the end of season 1. That literally was a tearjerker moment, because we basically see her character come full circle and learning that actually she does like the euphonium. She likes learning how to improve. She likes the beautiful sound it makes. She likes being part of an orchestra, a team of people that she actually manages to admire a great amount. So seeing her see like the thing that she's doing as a hobby and gradually become something that she's purposely indulging in just because she likes it so much and she likes the feeling of improving, that was a beautiful experience. And honestly, it is a relatable experience, something that you don't really see as much. So I felt like a sweep of fresh air. Kumiko's arc in general was one of the big draws of the show for me, and it's a reason why I would highly recommend the show to anyone. Even me mentioning that arc, I don't think it's a spoiler, because I think a lot of this show doesn't even necessarily directly involve Kumiko. It's a meandering between different characters, which brings me to my next point. This show has a large cast, which is to be expected because this is an orchestra anime. There are many members within the show and a lot of characteristics and a lot of different personalities kind of meshed together within this one show, but still, like, it doesn't feel as if it's just centered on Kumiko and like her little friend group. It actually does show the different personalities and different struggles of other people within the orchestra and how that could lead to complications in competitions and practice and within their team dynamic. So that's actually really interesting. I think I like that a lot because it reminds me of other shows I like. For example, Haikyuu, one of my favorite animes, if not my favorite anime of all time. They also do a good job showing the different personalities within the team, which makes it more enjoyable because it makes it not feel as if it's just a study of two characters and like the entire world is just a backdrop, but that they're actually a group of main characters that exist within an actual real world where different things from different people can affect your own life. So yeah, that makes it really interesting. For example, we get to see them be mature to a certain extent, so that way the story is digestible, but also immature in a way that makes sense for people in high school. For example, we see that Reina, the protagonist, as I mentioned before, she has a crush on the high school teacher. Oh, hell no! It is a bit of a cringe moment, but to be honest, I think a lot of us have experienced someone that's had that kind of infatuation before or have had that infatuation ourselves before. So it's a secondhand embarrassment that we can bear with because it is a bit realistic. They also have characters that have had siblings that have died or been sick, or they just have like complicated situations at home and that leads to them being affected within the group. I honestly really enjoy this anime just because they go beyond the school and into the home lives of a lot of these characters and show that how it can affect them within the priority, which is orchestra. Again, it just feels like very realistic while still keeping its intended dramatic beats. So that is really, really well done. Another thing is just like the girls in general. I think because the main cast is girls, even though this show isn't necessarily, I don't think, categorized as a shoujo. Honestly, I want to hear thoughts about that down below because I kept on trying to look it up and see like, is this a shoujo? Is it a josei? Is it whatever? There was no strict category for this marketing wise, which I think is part of the reason why it didn't really blow up as much in terms of like being a hobby anime, despite it being still very popular. I don't know, like the female characters specifically are very interesting just because they do have a certain cadence to their voices, which is natural, which you don't necessarily see with anime in particular. They really like the high-pitched, kawaii-fied voice of a female character. I don't know what the specific reason of that is, but it does make it a bit unbearable to watch, especially if you're watching like a female character in say like a shonen. It just feels super unnatural and it makes it hard to really connect with the characters. In this show, the characters talk very natural. That's why this show almost feels like ASMR at certain points because the characters are allowed to talk like normal human beings, but also has the backdrop of beautiful music and sound, which brings me to my next point. Another really great thing about this show is the sound. It's amazing, which you would expect it from an orchestra anime since it's like literally the center of the show. On top of an already really good soundtrack in which like you hear like this beautiful like arrangement, which is actually done by a college band if I'm not mistaken. They also have lots of great sound design just intertwined within the episodes. For example, like if they're practicing in the band or if they're in the hallway of a school, you can hear people tuning their instruments. You can hear people walking in the halls. You can hear slow conversation. You can hear hear just the meandering sounds that really make it feel like a real space, which I think is just like a beautiful attention to detail. And even like when they're walking home, when they're meandering about, there's music everywhere, which I think shows like what the priority of the show is, also shows what the priority of the characters is. I think that the sound design is actually one of the best I've heard across the board. And the show also reminded me why I like anime so much and why I kind of fell in love with it a bit is because sound design and the soundtrack are especially important within animation because they help set the tone. Sometimes emotional beats are really helped by the music, which I'm not saying it isn't done in live action, but I think when you're relying on like 2D models of characters in order to replicate the real world, music does play a heavier hand. It does a lot of the heavy lifting for these shows, and Sound Euphonium definitely benefits from the music and sound design doing a lot of the heavy lifting. But another thing, just the heavy lifting, which brings me to, I think, my last point. The cinematography of this show is actually like some of the most amazing stuff I've ever seen. There's a certain poetry to this, and honestly, like, it's another reason why I like Haikyuu. Look, something about me too. I'm always gonna bring up Haikyuu, but it's another thing I actually enjoy about Haikyuu that I also like in Sound Euphonium is the cinematography of it. And Haikyuu, like, I think part of the reason I really like the show is that it involves a lot of poetry and a lot of symbolism within the show while still being a very hype show. Sound Euphonium is not a hype show, and I think that's why it leans more into the poeticness and the symbolism of the shots that it takes within the sounds it wants to use. A lot of the time, actually, the show doesn't say directly what the characters are thinking. You get what the characters are thinking because of the certain associated shots. There's a specific term for this in film that I completely forgot. Sorry to my film professor, but yes, there are certain associated shots where you see a character just looking off in the distance, and then you see a shot of, say, like the river, you see a shot of a tree, or you see a shot of an instrument, and you can instantly glean what the character is thinking. Sound Euphonium is actually very, very good at that, and it makes the whole experience a lot more, it gives it a lot more texture because you're not just getting things like spoon-fed to you. It allows you to like search or like think of what the character might be thinking. And it also like makes it overall just a lot more meditative. Even if you've watched season 3 and you've seen the opening of that entire like sequence, the whole opening sequence was like poetry in motion. I don't know how to describe it, but it actually was one of the most beautiful things I've seen, and it made me sit down and just fully relax into like watching the show. It does a really good job setting the tone, but it also just shows, again, what's important to the characters, the certain things that we should be paying attention to in an episode. Kyoto Animation, I think overall is just really good at that, and I think that's why, like, I don't know, I can't imagine another studio really executing that as well. But yeah, Sound Euphonium, very excellent at that. And I suppose like my final reason for liking this show, honestly, I just like the Yuri, bro. Or at least I should say Yuri bait. The thing is, there is a bit of a romance in the show. A romance. It's between Kumiko and her childhood friend, but no one actually takes that as canon. The real romance, I think, is between her and Reina, again, her protagonist, who is the more passionate, kind of like counterpart of Kumiko. She was always passionate about orchestra, and she always had like the tools and the availability in order to like be successful in it, which I think is why she's so easily able to dedicate to it, but also she just has this natural passion for that. And then also her professor, which, I mean, bro. Kumiko and Reima, they have a lot of, they were roommates like tension. They are very familiar with touching each other. They have this emotional intimacy. They talk more honestly with each other than they do with any other characters in the show, which is why a lot of us ship them. But the studio and the mangaka have not made it canon. So I don't know, man. I really don't know. I think it's implied, but this is not even implied. It's like damn near like given to us point blank, but we just have to pretend we don't see it. That is a wrap on why it is I like Sound Euphonium. It's a really beautiful show. I think you should check it out. It just has a lot of good, powerful points that you don't really see that often, which is why it's a breath of fresh air. It's like for the same reason with like Free when you watch a lot of like, again, like fantasy shonen anime, I think Sound Euphonium adds a necessary diversity to the hobby slice of life sports anime genre, and it does something that none of them actually managed to execute quite as well. So you should go check it out. Season 3 is airing right now, and I'm personally enjoying it a lot. I can already see this going full circle. Kumiko's the 3rd year. There are so many things that are going to be tackled. I'm super excited about this, but yeah, go ahead and check it out. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Follow me on all my medias. Once again, they are linked down below, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye bye.